Bluegrass Jam Along is proud to be sponsored by Collins Guitars and Mandolins, each and every one built from the sound up in Austin, Texas. Bluegrass Jam Along is also brought to you by Token Picks, individually machined guitar and mandolin picks to bring out the best in you and your instrument.
I've never released a full instrumental thing. I've always written instrumental tunes, had some instrumental music on all of my records. But this just seemed fun, an idea to kind of be able to throw paint at the wall and just sort of have the freedom to dive into something different, kind of outside of the bluegrass structure, but also trying to bring some of that influence. And I thought with this group of musicians, that sounded really exciting to me to try to write for this band.
Hi, this is Matt, and you're listening to Bluegrass Jam Along, the podcast for anyone and everyone who loves bluegrass. Hey everybody, welcome back to Bluegrass Jam Along. My guest this week is Sierra Hull. Those of you who've been listening for a while will know she's been on the podcast a couple of times before. I'm delighted she is back to chat about The Movement, which is the instrumental piece that came out of a FreshGrass commission that she wrote a couple of years ago when recorded and has now been released. We chatted about this a little bit when I spoke to her for Tiptoe High Wire last year and in previous interviews, but the full thing is out now. So I just wanted to have a conversation with her about the process, about how she came to write it, kind of, you know, the intent behind it, and because it's just a fascinating bit of music, and I really, really love it. We chat about the kind of FreshGrass commission, the bunch of people she's got in the band, and how she kind of wrote with and for them. You know, some of the inspiration behind it, how she approaches this kind of thing. Really interesting, and like some of the challenges about how you release a piece of music like this, what you do with it. Yeah, really cool conversation. I really, really love this piece of music and just wanted to dig into some of the details and have a conversation about it. If you've missed any of the interviews I've done with Sierra before, I will stick a link in the show notes. You can go and find them. I'll also stick a link in the show notes to where you can go and see the videos for these tracks, because there's some very cool videos of these filmed at the FreshGrass studio. Go and have a look at those. They're really, really cool. And also I'll stick links into where you can go and buy copies of this record as well. So that is it, I think. Go and check all that out. But first, have a listen to me chatting with Sierra Hull all about The Movement. Sierra Hull, welcome back again to Bluegrass Jam Along.
Hey, Matt. Great to see you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you too. I'm excited to talk about what we're talking about tonight, because we've sort of touched on it slightly a couple of times when we've talked before, but it is now out in all its glory. And we're going to chat about The Movements.
Yeah, totally. I remember us talking about that a while ago now. So it's nice to finally have them out into the world. Long time coming, as a lot of things I tend to work on.
Well, I mean, this is quite a short gap between releases for you.
Yeah, well, it's funny because, you know, we were so busy last year with all the things around a Tiptoe High Wire, which is the last time you and I spoke. And, you know, this was kind of sitting there, kind of brewing on the back burner a little bit, kind of saving it until we put the Tiptoe High Wire music out into the world. And then, you know, knew we would eventually be getting The Movements out there, but just had to kind of find the right window.
Yeah, well, it's great to have them out and to be able to hear them finally. And for people who kind of don't know the background of this piece, this started out as a FreshGrass commission, didn't it?
It did, yeah. So FreshGrass being a festival up in North Adams, Massachusetts, that so many of our bluegrass friends have played. A really great festival. And each year they ask usually 2 or 3 folks, I think, or bands or solo artists to commission, you know, can we commission you to write something specific? And in this case, they came to me and they said, we were going to play the festival anyway. And they said, well, how would you feel about if we commission you to write a bluegrass concerto? And, of course I was like, well, that sounds super fun, you know, but like, what's a bluegrass concerto? You know, it's like that kind of idea of like, okay, I kind of think I know what that means, but also, you know, they were like, we give you full liberty to just take that and run with it, whatever that means, whatever you want to write. But we like the idea of thinking it would be cool if you wrote an instrumental something. So at the time I had just started working with, I guess I had been working with most of the guys in my current band for about a year. And our bass player had just come on board that year, that very year, which was 2022, I guess. And so it was still pretty new. I mean, like getting to know each other musically and all that, but they're so talented. And I kind of thought, man, I had always wanted to do an instrumental record, but just hadn't really, to this day, I've never released a full instrumental thing. I've always written instrumental tunes, had some instrumental music on all of my records. But this just seemed fun, an idea to kind of be able to throw paint at the wall and just sort of have the freedom to dive into something different, kind of outside of the bluegrass structure, but also trying to bring some of that influence. And I thought with this group of musicians, that sounded really exciting to me to try to write for this band. So yeah, I had a lot of like pre-existing ideas that I kind of thought, we all as musicians, I think, have voice memos and stacks of ideas kind of laying around. And so there was like lots of little seeds and things that immediately came to mind when I decided to bite off this project. And then, of course, the guys brought all their voices as well to it. So it was super fun to make and write.
And how kind of open is the brief? Like, is there any definition of what concerto means beyond, like, it's a 3-movement thing, or is it totally open?
Well, typically, I mean, and I'm no expert on concertos for sure, but I think the format is usually fast, slow, fast. That's sort of like the flow of a typical concerto. So usually in 3 pieces, which is why we did 3 different movements. And with the first one having more of an up-tempo kind of approach, usually the middle part, the second part kind of opens up and can kind of slow down and breathe a little bit. So, I mean, beyond that was sort of about all I went into it thinking about. It's just, sort of having a bit of a fast, slow, fast format, 3 pieces, and trying to find a way to showcase everybody in the band where there's, it's easy sometimes. And I've heard like other people talk about this too, like, because, mandolin is my instrument. I can kind of write on mandolin, sometimes guitar, but like, there's a lot of mandolin-esque ideas that I'm naturally just going to start dumping, but then trying to open that up and go, well, cool. This sounds cool on the mandolin, but what if this part was played on the guitar? What if actually the fiddle played this? Or instead of this kind of rhythmic thing that I'm doing, what if we figured out even a more interesting way to open up the drum kit and let him do something, So trying to take some existing ideas and sort of spread them out throughout the whole ensemble so that it wasn't just, I didn't want it to just feel like a mandolin bluegrass concerto. I wanted it to feel like a real showcase of this band and something they could get excited about, working on with me too.
Well, I think that really comes across because it's one of the things that I sort of first really noticed about this piece. Hearing the whole thing is just how much stuff is passed around between you. Like, and it's obviously highly composed rather than a kind of conversational fiddle tune thing going on. But the amount of kind of thread that passes from instrument to instrument, and then there's sort of layers of stuff going on together, and it doesn't often stay on one instrument for a long time, and I really like that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's fun to kind of now have some good distance from it and sort of just perform the piece. Like we just did a big West Coast tour here in the States this past month, and played all 3 movements together in the show every night, which I wasn't really sure how that was going to be received at first. It was kind of like, can we get away with playing? It's not super long. It's like just shy of 15 minutes, the whole thing together. But still, that's sort of, it's a lot to sort of dump on your audience, to take in. But man, the crowd was so receptive to it, and I think like it just brought us a lot of joy being able to finally share it. What feels like after we've sort of lived with it for a while. Like we've been living with it for a while. It's a typical story, I guess, of finally releasing a project. You go from the writing process of where it's all really new and you feel like, can we even play this thing without stopping? Can we get through all the pieces and sort of the way it felt when we premiered it, like back in 2022, definitely felt that way. I mean, I was writing little things and we were rehearsing it pretty much up until the moment we played it. I mean, it was a little bit like one of the only times we played the whole thing fully through was at the debut of the piece. It was kind of like, okay, let's work on this section. Okay, let's rehearse this section. And then finally it was like, okay, now the time is here. We got to play the whole thing. And I remember there's a photo of us, which we laugh at sometimes because there's a photo of us when we obviously hit the last note and we managed to play the full piece without really like screwing anything up very much. And we all look so stoked. It's really funny. We just all look like we're like, yay, we did it.
Yeah, there's nothing kind of quite like that thing of living on the edge of, am I going to get to the end of this or not? And so, like, particularly in a band situation, you're almost looking around going, is everybody still here? Do we leave anybody behind? You know?
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, that like I guess what I'm trying to say though is going from that moment to like now, fast forward, a few years later where we recorded the studio versions of this stuff. I guess it would have been the fall of 2022 when we premiered it, and it was like early in 2023. We tracked it. And so it kind of just been sitting there, and it's funny to see how like stuff has kind of evolved from the live performance from those original studio recordings. And so now, not that the piece is just suddenly easy to play. There's, some stuff that's just obviously technically fatiguing or challenging to play. So, I'm not going to act like it's a piece of cake now, but I think we know what the piece is and we know what it does and how, and our best performance of it, what it can be. So, there's there's a different way of sharing the music when you've had that kind of time to live with it. And I think the separation between recording it and then finally now putting it out. And we've played Movement 3 a lot in our live show over the last few years. And occasionally would play one or two, but it was pretty rare. I think we kind of felt like, let's sort of just save this back a little bit. But Movement 3 had kind of become a bit of a staple in our live show, and people would ask us, when are you going to put that out? And I'm like, it's coming, I promise. But it's nice to finally be able to put it out with having this much time to sort of absorb what it is for all of us, I think.
Also to get to go back into the studio and record the videos that you've been putting out of these, because that is really interesting just from a kind of how the piece has evolved slightly thing. But also with a piece like this, we were talking about just how much stuff is passed around. It's also really visually interesting to watch because you get to see that happen.
Yeah, it was fun to have a chance to return back to the FreshGrass Festival last fall. It's the first time we'd been back since we premiered the piece. And they have this beautiful studio there, and we just kind of started thinking like, man, we know we're going to release this stuff in the spring. What if we could just go in the studio and have an actual like live visual too, with video and everything of sort of like representing the current moment of this music too, which sounds funny because in some ways it's like, of course, the studio release is a current release, but it's also something that we now recorded, a while back. So this felt like kind of like a nice way to bookend, and also, yeah, just give people the visual, because sometimes with a piece like this, there is a lot going on. There's a lot of things to kind of, try to wrap your head around if, you've got 5 instruments kind of playing some kind of counter line at the same time. It's like to be able to sort of visually, put 2 and 2 together, I think can be a fun thing for the audience.
Yeah, I think it really enhances it. Like, I'm not a fan of music videos per se. I'd rather just listen to something, but something like this where you're watching a performance, I think it really does kind of give you a little insight into what's going on sometimes. Because like complicated instrumental music can be a bit dense and tricky to get into at first, to kind of get a little tag on it, because you haven't got the structure of, like, lyrics just give you the structure of a piece. They tell you which section you're in, and it's obvious when something's recurring. But with something like this particularly, it's just great to have a through line that you can sort of follow.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think like, these pieces all work separately, but it's really kind of meant to be listened to all together. Like I said, we've played Movement 3 as its own. You find yourself on a festival set. Like we were just at New Orleans Jazz Festival this past weekend, and it's like you get a 75-minute festival set. We're probably not going to play the whole 15-minute concerto in the middle of that set, though maybe if we were going to do it anywhere, maybe that could have been the place to do it. But yeah, I think any of the pieces kind of work, especially 1 and 3 work really well just as kind of standalone instrumental pieces. But in a perfect world, folks could listen to them all back to back.
We'll be right back with you just after this. The long-awaited Hill Country series from Collins Guitars represents a new voice in their acoustic lineup. Rooted deep in the bluegrass world, these new Dreadnought NOM models feature a strong fundamental tone with a dry, warm and woody character that's sure to catch the attention of players who hold the vintage instruments of the 30s in their highest regard. Watch world-class pickers Jake Workman, Kenny Smith and Bob Minner perform with new Hill Country instruments on the Collins Guitars YouTube channel, and learn more at collinsguitars.com. Founded in Petaluma, California, and born of a love for music, Token has developed a unique approach to making picks. Individually machined from premium materials like Ultem, Peak, and compression moulded Taulon, Token picks are designed to bring clarity, speed, and tone to your playing. Used by top artists like Chris Eldridge, Jake Workman, Andy Falco, and Trey Hensley, Token picks are fast becoming a bluegrass favourite. Follow on Instagram at TokenMade and learn more at tokenmade.com. When you were saying earlier about having this sort of voice memo app full of ideas and sort of instrumental thoughts, and you've been kind of looking for maybe an excuse to write something instrumental, how did you kind of approach it as a starting point? What was your kind of your first thought in terms of how you were going to approach this as a writing thing?
Yeah, well, so part of it was just me kind of going, okay, what are some small existing ideas? In some cases, like reasonable chunks of stuff, but also like, basic ideas that then I could sort of think about not just as, me trying to do some mandolin thing, but how we could open it up to other people. So like even the opening, let's say like movement 1, there's like, the way it opens, it's almost like this echo kind of thing that's happening where I play one note, somebody else plays another chord. It's like kind of between, especially, all 5 instruments, starting on like the and a 4 and 1, and then you kind of dance around this sort of idea. So I had demoed, me doing that on mandolin, like, I don't know, gosh, could have even been 10 years ago, of this idea, and had this, like the opening part. But once I started thinking about this band doing it, it's kind of like, okay, I mean, I remember, sitting down with the guitar and going, well, maybe guitar could sound cool playing this piece, maybe if later at the end it came back to this, but I'm not the one playing it, it's guitar playing it. And I remember, I play guitar enough to kind of figure it out, sit down, and I was like, okay. And then I thought, boy, this seems kind of hard on guitar though. Like on mandolin, at least I have some open strings and it's stretchy, but it makes sense why I would write it, On guitar, I was like, oh, this is all really contained. And so I remember like videoing myself and sending it to Shaun, like, hey, could you play this on guitar? And is there an easier way to do this? This seems to be what I like. This seems to be the best fingering and all that. But like, I'm sure you could figure out something easier. And then, turns out, nope, it's just really hard on guitar. And so, but also knowing that if anybody can do it, Shaun can do it. He can play it. And so just taking some ideas and sort of recycling them around, the kind of middle A flat section of movement 1, again, I had sort of the majority of that sort of existed as something I'd been trying to make into something for a long time and had just never really found a home for it. And in hindsight, it was great because it was like just this existing idea that then I could go, oh, maybe it could be part of this concerto. And again, trying to find ways to open it up and leave space for one instrument to play a line instead of it all feeling like some big mandolin, extravaganza, trying to open things up. But then ideas like there's these rotating hits, that happen with the band on the first part of movement 1, and like, getting together with everybody. And I just had the idea to do straight hits. And then Mark was like, oh, what if we rotated every 8th note, basically, so that where the hits are happening, and so like having these guys' minds and brains, as part of the process, even though maybe a big chunk of the musical ideas were like things that I had kind of already been storing away and pulling and kind of then going, okay, what happens if the guitar plays this or the mandolin plays this? The piece really became what it was by everybody contributing their own, both arrangement and compositional ideas along the way, where, maybe I might have an idea for something, but it wasn't the most friendly, bass thing. And then we go, hey, well, can you actually just make this? What if this is a bass moment instead of me playing some crazy line? What if you kind of take the liberty to create something here? Yeah. So, I mean, it was just a lot of little moving parts like that. Like movement 2, I had this idea that it would be kind of fun to write something based on the notes behind the nut for a long time, the doo 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 doo. And again, I remember kind of thinking, oh, well, this could be interesting. Like, and then what if we built the melody off of like, well, I wonder what Shaun's notes are. And so then I'm going, hey, what are your notes behind the guitar? Okay, now what if you played those notes, And so trying to, I don't know, just let everybody have room to bring things to the table. With movement 2, I basically told, Erik and Avery, like, I think the main idea of this would be like a 6/8 feel against 4. Like I kind of went into it knowing that. There's a Brad Mehldau piece that, called When It Rains. That's a little bit of an inspirational lift, from that idea where it's like once the drums drops in, you're like, oh, that's actually 4, so the idea of kind of like if something starts in a more triplety feel and, 6, so to speak, that it's actually just triplets against 4, with the way the drums hit. So just little things like that, wanting that part to breathe, have a really simple kind of feel and melody, with an interesting rhythm. And yeah, just like kind of sort of just seeing what happens when we would all get together, and then, slowly recycling other parts, from the different sections of the movements. Maybe if we were looking for a way to, add a fiddle part somewhere, we might go, well, can we pull inspiration from one of the other lines in one of the other movements and sort of like try to tie it back in somehow. So, little bits of that, not to go on in the nerdy sense, but just, lots of throwing paint at the wall, kind of having a bigger vision of it, and then like letting everyone bring their own goodness to it,
Well, it's really interesting because there's such a kind of rich tradition of kind of progressive, like instrumental string band music, going back to like Grisman Quintet and before, and lots of variations of that through the kind of Baylor style of stuff onto Hawktail, but I don't know of anything that has drums as such an integral part of it as this. It feels like quite a new sound to have that kind of those textures, but with drums being very much a voice rather than like just a rhythm component.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think we're lucky to get to play with Mark because he's so good at the acoustic music kind of thing. I mean, I didn't grow up playing with drummers. I totally grew up, full-on bluegrass kid, mandolin being the drums. I never really thought I would have drums in my band. I mean, we've probably talked about this before. So I just think, he happens to be the right aesthetic to know how to weave in and out of a piece like this in a way, that you can say somewhat comes from a jazz background too, but also just having a lot of experience in playing dynamically in all kinds of styles of music. So yeah, it's been really fun just kind of exploring, because I do think that I agree, it sort of sets the textural side of what this music sounds like apart a little bit from some of the other more modern acoustic instrumental things.
And it's so surprising just how melodic he is, because you think of drums as being a rhythm instrument. Obviously they are. But when you hear people play them and you hear phrasing and you hear melody, it's just such a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. I think that's an awesome way to describe his playing. He is a very melodic drummer, which is an interesting thing. But it also, what's cool about it is it also frees me up to be able to do other things on the mandolin, whereas like if you think about what even movement 2 is, if I were really wanting to achieve in sort of the traditional bluegrass string band kind of ensemble, that 6/8 feel against a 4/4 feel, then mandolin would probably be the thing to drop in. And then another instrument like fiddle would have to be the main melody, probably, whereas in this case, because he's holding down that 4, then mandolin can be the first melody. And then when fiddle kind of opens up and breathes on the B part, it's just, it's such a nice open, like, there's the fiddle, so, yeah, it's really fun to kind of dive into that and have somebody that's able to, paint with a really broad palette, musically on the drums like that.
Well, I love that part in movement too. I love anything that intentionally drags your ear around a little bit and shifts the ground under you so you're not entirely sure where you stand and then tells you where you're standing. You go, of course. And there's the lovely moment because the guitar obviously comes in intentionally, kind of every beat exactly the same, no inflection to tell you where you are. And the drums come in, you go, and then you go, okay, no, we are now, but the drums come in. But then you come in playing the melody and you're stretching it around and playing right on the back of the beat and not kind of like locking it in, but just adding another level of slight complexity on top of that. So the kind of the breadth of all that together is a really lovely moment.
Thank you. Thank you. And I mean, the first part is a little bit intense, It's like I can see how if you were just like, clicking on movement 2, either on streaming or YouTube or something, and you just heard like the first minute, you'd be like, what's going on? What is this? But I think that's also part of the fun is that when it finally opens up, there's sort of like a release in the simplicity of it. There's enough intrigue for it to be interesting, I think, as a listener, but also like the whole idea is that you can kind of go, let me just take a breath from all the information I just heard, especially like say coming out of the end of movement 1, which is one of the most, I'd say it's one of the biggest counterpoint movements of the whole thing, or sections rather of all the movements. And so to come out of that where you've really got 5 instruments like just doing all kinds of stuff against each other to then having this simplicity of what movement 2 eventually becomes, was sort of the goal, that it would be a moment of release.
And do you find, once the piece was kind of finished, was there a lot of improvisation left? Because you see, you're saying people were bringing ideas to the mix while you were putting it all together and kind of the arrangements. And did it end up fairly settled after that, or is there a lot of improvisation left in it?
Well, so let's see. Movement 1, pretty much all of it is through composed, except for there's kind of that jammy open solo section that's like, after we've played the fiddle tune part in the middle of the tune, which is all in A flat, then it sort of opens up. So when we were playing it live on tour this past month, for example, that part's free reign. We can you might quote things from the record because sometimes it just feels good to do that. But also like it's kind of free reign the way people are weaving in and out of, or at least me, Shaun and Avery as the main soloists there. It's like all that's just open territory to be whatever. But then, when we hit the fiddle tune part, it's like there's parts where the fiddle's doubling me and then guitar, has a little counter line against, these different sections. And it is moving time signatures quite a lot too. So, it's like most of that is through composed, all the way up to the very end. Movement 2, some of it, it's interesting. Like I would say, 99% of it is pretty through composed, but the opening part sort of started with just being like, what happens if you guys just, I kind of gave Avery and Erik a little bit of free reign on that one to just kind of improvise a bunch of different openings and let's just kind of see what happens. And so funny enough, like some of what they played improvised on the premiere at the FreshGrass Festival, was so cool that we're like, can you kind of just do that in the studio? It almost like became a part, you know what I mean? Even though I think in my mind that was going to be like, I wanted there to be a little bit of improv on every piece. But then that one, it almost became such a memorable thing. And that one was supposed to be the improv, that they get their improv moment there. But it just became almost like a memorable movement against, all puns intended, their counterpoint against each other, the way it happened to work out, that they almost kind of like relearned some of what they played. So it's not always going to be 100% like the record, but it's dialing from the inspiration of something that was originally improvised. And then every now and then the little section at the end, Shaun may dance around that part, his guitar part just a little bit when he finally gets the melody at the very end. But for the most part, it's all pretty through composed. And then movement 3, it's all pretty much through composed except for the solo sections that that you hear, and everybody in the band gets one with drums going first. And then, later fiddle, guitar, mandolin, bass, all that when we play it live is always different. We're always pushing in those moments to see what we can do live. That's just kind of fun and keeping each other, on our toes a little bit. And that's all over like some hits too, which funny enough, like sometimes I try to go, like I said, I can kind of point to that Brad Mehldau thing and go, yeah, I think I always wanted to write something like that, where it was like, the shock of when the drums come in and then finally like working with the drummer. I was like, oh, that'd be fun to like do that in the kind of acoustic sense with like guitar or mandolin. And even those hits, I think as simple as they are, I can say I think that was my like nod to my buddy Corey Wong a little bit. There's been so much stuff where, playing with him, the band, there's like these fun hits that people get to improvise over. And like if you have a really tight rhythm section that can nail syncopated kind of hits, so where the third one is a little bit more syncopated, I can definitely say, oh, I think that's probably where that inspiration came from to do that. So it's interesting to kind of dissect it and kind of go, all right, where do you kind of give the props to the inspiration for some of this stuff, and then other things just kind of fall out of the air a little bit.
Well, it's interesting. I talked to Chris Eldridge a while ago, and he said that when it wasn't even Punch Brothers at that point, but when they were doing the How to Grow a Woman from the Ground record, there was a definite sense that Watch Out Breakdown was kind of a bit of a tip of the hat to Whitewater.
For sure.
Like Bella, and just those things have gone, I'd like to do something like that. That obviously ends up being nothing like it really, but
sure, totally.
And do you have like instrumental records like that you that are your gold standard for that kind of thing?
Oh man, well, I mean, I even something like Not All Who Wander Are Lost. If we're going to talk about Chris, Thiele, it's like that was a record that came out and I think influenced every mandolin player my age. Most of us probably sat down and tried to learn every note of it. Certainly things like the Strength in Numbers records, or some of the Bela's bluegrass, instrumental records and things like that, like Drive or Tales of the Acoustic Planet. Definitely. I think they're in there. Kind of like, before we started this recording, you were mentioning talking to Tim O'Brien and one of his songs, and how, it's like some of that stuff, if you've heard it long enough, and I think especially at a pivotal time in your life, like some of those records are, those Nickel Creek records, the, Thiele solo albums, they're deep in the psyche, the musical psyche, and I'm sure that influence inevitably creeps out,
Yeah, it's hard to imagine how it couldn't really.
Yeah.
And did you sort of think about how you might release this? Because it's a funny thing to do, isn't it? It's to put out 15 minutes of music, and like one of the joys of streaming is you can put anything out at any point. But Jerry Douglas went down the route of including his concerto on an album. Jacob Jolliffe did the same. It's a strange kind of thing to think about putting out into the world, isn't it?
It is, and I certainly thought for the longest time, I don't really know what to do with this. Like, I feel like it's something I'm proud of that we did, and I feel like it's worth sharing with people, but I'm not sure really how to do it. And I wondered if I should write some more stuff, or could even put a few vocal songs on a project but ultimately I just kind of felt like, this kind of is what it is. And I sort of just want to give it to people being the thing, and not saying in any way that if the choice for an artist to add stuff around it is watering it down, because that can be the absolute right, like, creative choice too. But for me, I felt like anything I would be adding to it would be for some weird marketing value more than the right creative decision for releasing it. But it is like kind of interesting because, as part of this, like, you can't, well, at least in my discussions, if I'm not misunderstanding, like, we kind of just had to drop the whole thing all at once because it's not over a certain amount of time. So like, if you release more than whatever percentage of an album before the album is out, like it sort of gets clumped in this weird thing with streaming. So it was like, because it's only 3 tracks and it's only like 15 minutes, one track is a significant portion of that, right? So it's like, basically, then I was advised that we couldn't like even sprinkle it out, and we were just going to have to put the whole thing out anyway. So I was kind of like, well, screw it. This is how it's meant to be listened to anyway. So yeah, it's a little bit like, does feel like from a, trying to get people to listen to something standpoint. It's like you put out a record these days, you usually roll out several singles in advance. There was not really an opportunity to do that. It's just kind of like, hey, everybody, for anyone paying attention, here's this thing. And we're just giving it to you. Yeah, but, that's part of it. And I sort of look at this as a, I don't know, just like a creative, like more, I hate to use the word legacy project because that's kind of a weird thing to say, but like, you know what I mean? It's just something that I feel like is a moment in time. It's something that I'm creatively proud that we made, and feel like, it can live among the catalog in whatever way that people find their way to it,
I think that's one of the beautiful things about the FreshGrass commissions is they sort of create a space for people to create a thing they may not necessarily either get round to or feel they can or have the space to. It's almost like a gift of time in a way to do a thing that might not be the thing you'd normally do.
Yeah, a gift of time, and then once you agree to do it, you got to do it. It's like I had all these instrumental things sitting around for a long time, but, didn't have a home for all these pieces, didn't have all the connectors for them. And it's just easy to be like, well, this isn't going to be the most, this isn't the thing I need to be spending my time on right now because I've got this, that's like kind of coming up. And it's like, when somebody sort of poses the challenge, would you like to do this? And then it sort of seems like, oh, well, you're kind of giving me permission to do it. So, okay, I'll have a home to be able to share it, even if it is just in this live setting. But then you spend so much time working on something like that. And then even for the band, like learning it, it's like a little bit like, well, are we really going to only play it this one time? And this was just for this one 15-minute performance, never to be heard of again. And so it kind of felt like, well, we should capture it. We should record it and eventually put it out into the world. So, and I'll say at first, I didn't think, like, we were a little late in really thinking about it, just knowing they were coming out. And I think the idea was like, oh, we'll just put it up on streaming. That's all it's going to be. It's not really long enough for a regular LP. It's too short for a 7-inch, because the 7-inch, like we did a couple Christmas tracks 2 years ago, released, an A-side, B-side, but there's 3 sides to this. So I was like, I don't really know how to release it. I mean, we could do a CD, but it seems like you'd want to do some sort of LP. And so it kind of was late in the game when we're like, wait a minute, we could actually have all 3 tracks on one side. And then on the other side, they can do this cool, like, etching art design. So that's coming soon. Folks can pre-order that, but it's exciting to go, oh, well, we can actually, I don't know. There's something about like putting out singles on streaming, and you can kind of throw up stuff anytime you want on the streaming platforms, and folks listen to it, and that's cool. I do love the freedom of just being able to put something out and not feel like you have to have everything be physical. But man, you work on something like this and you invest so much time and energy and money and all the things into like recording it and putting it out. It's kind of exciting to go, oh, it can live in a physical format too. As somebody that just grew up with physical albums and stuff, it's exciting to feel like, because I didn't think we were going to be able to do that. I thought it was just going to be digital only. So I'm excited that we could actually have like, a tangible physical release of it as well, to just exist.
Yeah, it's lovely to be able to do that. And I think sometimes there's something about the freedom of everything being there online and streamable is wonderful. But there's also something really lovely about just making a conscious choice to put a thing on, to take a piece of plastic or whatever and put it on and make one choice that lasts for however long that choice is, rather than flitting between songs. And I found myself doing it a lot more recently, and there's a little bit of a ritual about it as well, and a sort of, it's like creating a moment to stop and do something rather than it being constant wallpaper almost.
Absolutely. No, I think it's a sacred kind of a way to listen in today's day and age, where we just have everything at our fingertips, and we're all walking around with our AirPods and stuff all the time. And, I love listening to stuff too, but it's also like, to really like sit here in my little office and put on a vinyl and, really pump it through nice speakers and enjoy that is I don't know. It's just a special way to actually hear something that to me just feels like you can internalize it differently than, the listening while distracted, as most of us probably do, running around doing stuff. At least I do. Half the time when I am listening to music, it's when I'm walking through an airport or cleaning my house or like I'm exercising. Like I'm listening, but I'm also in the midst of something else. Whereas if I choose to put on an LP, I'm going to sit here in this chair and just like listen to it, and it's a different experience.
I think particularly with something like this that is designed to hang together as a journey, not just as three separate, it works as three separate tracks as well, but, something like this, or particularly some of the other FreshGrass stuff like Blue Heron Suite, Sarah Jarosz's record, or just sitting and being taken on a journey for however long that lasts, is I think it's something that I've become much more aware that I crave in recent years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's a glorious journey, and it's been really fun chatting about the journey you went on to put it together. Thanks so much. I've really enjoyed this.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I appreciate you listening to it so intently, and always great to see you. Bluegrass Jam Along is proud to be sponsored by Collins Guitars and Mandolins, each and every one built from the sound up in Austin, Texas.